Hello and welcome to Catholic Answers Live. I am Cy Kellett, your host. We got a bit of a pastoral show for you today. I think it's going to be very, very good. I know that many people will find it helpful. Our first guest is always helpful to people. It's our first time with our second hour guest. That'll be Dr. Kevin Majors. From Harvard Medical School, psychiatrist, who will talk to us about anxiety, and he'll do so from the psychiatric perspective and the Catholic perspective, joining those and both helpful to those who suffer with anxiety. So hang on for that, the second hour. First hour, our good friend Scott Wieman is back with us. Scott is the founder of Catholic in Recovery, growing all over and doing all sorts of great things. And we're going to talk about addiction and recovery. So if you have questions about addiction and recovery, maybe an issue in the family, your own issue with a friend, or anything else that you'd like to ask about addiction and recovery, you're welcome to call 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884, Catholic in Recovery. I'll tell you what, I'll let Scott tell you about it, because what will happen, inevitably, he will have to correct something that I say about it. So first of all, Scott Wieman, welcome back.
Yeah, thank you. It's really great to be here. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about addiction recovery, our faith, and all the topics that surround it.
Again, 888-31-TRUTH is the number. So you're going to have to start us off with the blurb on Catholic in Recovery, because I know that even though we've been doing this for years together, and also I've heard you on other programs, I've seen you in all kinds of places, there are people who still don't know of this growing movement of Catholic in Recovery.
Yeah. So I like to describe us as a community of men and women around the world who are seeking freedom from a variety of addictions, compulsions, and unhealthy attachments by blending the wisdom of 12-step addiction recovery with the sacramental life and traditions of the Catholic Church. We serve individuals and families impacted by addiction and a variety of addictions: alcoholism, drug addiction, compulsive overeating, restricted eating, gambling addiction, lust-related addictions, codependency, technology addiction, nicotine, you name it. There is a place for you in Catholic in Recovery.
And you can find it at catholicinrecovery.com. Okay.
Yep.
I'm so scared to say it because I always get it wrong. catholicinrecovery.com. And you also, you have the Catholic in Recovery workbook, but you have your own book that you wrote, and it's about recovery and the sacraments. So maybe I'll just start there, and I will invite people to call, because I'll tell you what happens. Sometimes when Scott's on, people are not sure what to call about or whether it's okay to call, and then everybody calls. So don't let that happen. If there's an issue in the family, if you're dealing with a personal issue, if you'd like to ask a question about integrating your faith to your recovery work, whatever the question is, Scott's happy to take it, 888-318-7884. But why don't you tell me a little bit about the book, Scott, while we're waiting for people to dial that number, and about this idea of the sacraments integrated into the 12-step approach.
Yeah. So my first book, The 12 Steps in the Sacraments, which was published back in 2017 by Ave Maria Press, really shares some anecdotes, my story and the stories of others who have found new life and really the miracle of recovery through the grace of God, and finding definition to our higher power through the sacramental life and through the 12 steps in Jesus Christ, and a Trinitarian understanding of God as we know him in our Catholic faith. And the book is outlined really to overlap the sacraments of the Church. We particularly focus on the sacrament of baptism, reconciliation, Eucharist, confirmation, although discussions of matrimony, holy orders, and anointing of the sick is not void in that discussion. And really just seeing the similarities, the parallel paths that someone who is working through the 12 steps of addiction recovery, which began in the 1930s and had great Catholic influence in its early stages, and really coming to understand how to integrate our sacramental life, rather than, a lot of people find struggle in, they go to 12-step recovery meetings for a variety of addictions, and they may feel like they're not really allowed to express the fullness of their faith in those groups. And, 12-step recovery groups, secular and Catholic in Recovery, have saved my life and continue to save my life. And it's also helpful for people to understand really how to lean into the sacraments, how to integrate our faith faith life into the wisdom and the working of the 12 steps. So, beginning with baptism, whereas we find our true identity as a beloved child of God through our baptism. Oftentimes people are hung up by some, I think, personification of addiction when we say, like if I say, my name is Scott, I'm an alcoholic. Well, Scott, you're not, truly, that doesn't define who you are. And when I say my name is Scott, I'm an alcoholic, I'm not saying define me by the worst thing or the darkest part of my life. But what I'm expressing is, I've experienced the darkness of alcoholism, and I have a God, or my God has freed me from those shackles. Baptism also gives us an indelible mark that addiction cannot stain or tarnish. And so really leaning into that aspect is really important.
888-318-7884. By the way, you don't have to be Catholic to call. If you're in need of help or information, Scott's happy to help, and we'd be happy to take your call. 888-318-7884. An important part of our Christian faith, however, and of the life of the Catholic Church is healing. And maybe this is one that we are rediscovering more and more. I don't know, but it does seem that way to me. And Scott's a part of that with the founding of and the growth of Catholic in Recovery. Do check out CatholicInRecovery.com if this is something you're interested in. The calls are coming in. There's 2 lines open, 888-318-7884. I just want to, before I go to the calls, a Catholic in Recovery meeting. I just said if you're not Catholic, you can call. Say you're I don't know, a person of faith, a Christian person, maybe who's not Catholic, but you go to the 12-step programs, and I do hear this from people, and you're like, there's a lot of ripping on Christianity there. There's a lot of, I don't always feel comfortable sharing. Could they come to a Catholic in Recovery meeting?
Absolutely. Open to all. Catholics, non-Catholics, new Catholics, old Catholics, people returning to the faith. We find a lot of people who have experienced the miracle of Jesus working in their lives through the 12 steps and through a 12-step fellowship, who want greater definition to their higher power or God of their understanding. And so as a result, many return to the church or come to the church for the first time. And they are welcome, as are anyone who's seeking or just wants to express their Christian faith or their Catholic faith. Of course, we're going to, put an emphasis and a focus on the sacraments and liturgy and things of that nature. But I think it's a great place both to evangelize and to share the beauty of our faith through a very practical lens and through the healing made available through Jesus Christ.
Amen to that. All right, we're going to go to the phones, if that's all right with you, Scott. You ready to take some calls?
Let's do it.
All right, let's start with Martin down in Houston, Texas, listening on the Guadalupe Radio Network. Martin, go ahead with your question for our guest, Scott Wieman.
Yeah, you're right. You're right on both counts, humid and Houston. So my wife of 22 years has been diagnosed with anxiety disorder a long time ago, actually as a teenager, and we have 2 daughters. The younger one is also diagnosed with anxiety disorder, and she may or may not have ADHD on top of it, so it gets pretty hairy pretty fast, and you can imagine that a teenage girl and her mom sometimes fight, but these two really resonate like a microphone and speakers. It gets pretty hairy sometimes. I think that my wife is codependent with a younger daughter. I have an older daughter also, and it's really kind of playing havoc on the whole household dynamic. And I have thus far refrained from saying the word codependent with the younger daughter to my wife because I'm not sure how she's going to react to it. And every time I sort of play out what's going to happen in my mind, her anxiety disorder kicks in, or she just goes into flat denial. It just gets ugly really fast. And I'm wondering if you have any suggestions on, without necessarily just placing a label on it, but actually doing something useful with that understanding. How can I approach a spouse with anxiety disorder and codependence?
All right, Martin, thank you.
Yeah, great question, Martin. Thanks for the call. And I think it's important here just to give some definition to that term codependency, which is a term that can often bring a lot of baggage and almost a lot of I don't know, it's not a word that often sits well. So I appreciate your approach thus far. Codependency I define as needing someone else's wellness in order to be well. And there's, I think, a greater depth to that as well, which we could get into. But really, not being well until someone else is well. And so we go to great lengths, often at the cost of our own wellness and in turn, spiritual life or trust in God. And so, yeah, it's interesting to, I think that you're probably avoiding your own probably codependent behaviors in needing your wife to be well. I mean, don't get me wrong as well. We should be concerned about the wellness of our loved ones. And, it's not that we are to sit idle and just allow you figure this out. That's not what I'm saying by any degree. But, an approach could be just to ask, what are the costs of this? Like, how are you doing? And, oftentimes codependency is a trait that develops within families that are dealing with mental distress, anxiety, depression, great fears, other personality disorders, but also with addictions, compulsions, and unhealthy attachments. And so I think that to tread lightly, but to tread in a very loving and concerning way, but not to express so much of your concern, not to share that, you need her wellness in order for you to be well, but just to provide some love and support, and perhaps an objective listener. I would probably seek to, as the St. Francis prayer tells us, or as we express in the St. Francis prayer, seek to understand rather than to be understood. And so you might lead with some questions or lead with some questions that just to get to know, like, how does this affect her? What does she do in response to some of these? And I would imagine that in her response and in part of that discussion, she may come to the conclusion that she maybe needs some help or needs to create some very healthy boundaries in the relationship. It can be especially challenging with a parent and a child, where the child is struggling. We as parents want to do everything that we can for our children. But sometimes the realization that we can't do everything can be challenging to accept. So I would probably suggest, I would certainly suggest just leading with questions, seeking to understand rather than to be understood. And perhaps, I don't know, even making a suggestion of going to a meeting might even be a challenge, but, just providing some options. I think oftentimes when dealing with mental health challenges or dealing with addiction, we just lose sight of what options are available. And we think that the only, managing or controlling or is our only option when there are other options. We do also have a Catholic in Recovery group in the Woodlands, Texas, just north of Houston, which can be helpful as well. But certainly lead with seeking to understand rather than to be understood.
Martin, that brings us to the break, so I've got to go to the break. Thank you very much. I hope that was helpful to you. There are 2 lines open. We're talking addiction and recovery with Scott Wieman, the founder of Catholic in Recovery. More right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
Hang on. Catholic Answers Live will return in a moment.
Are you a coffee drinker? If so, you can now enjoy a coffee roasted to perfection by the Carmelite monks of Wyoming. Delicious Mystic Monk coffee is roasted and prepared by monks in a hidden cloistered monastery and is available in over 25 varieties. All Mystic Monk coffees are works of perfection and labors of love. For more information on how to purchase Mystic Monk coffee, visit mysticmonkcoffee.com. That's mysticmonkcoffee.com.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Hi, this is Father Mike Schmitz. Please join me for Ascension's Bible in a Year and Catechism in a Year here on EWTN Radio. We're going through the entire Bible and the Catechism in 365 days. If you've ever wanted to understand what it means to be Catholic and allow those truths to shape your life, this is for you.
Bible in a Year and Catechism in a Year with Father Mike Schmitz, tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific on EWTN Radio.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I am Cy Kellett, your host. Our guest is Scott Wieman. who I am happy to call a good friend. I hope Scott feels that way about us, but we just think the world of Scott. It's always great when he's around, and he's just an extremely helpful person, and he's the founder of Catholic in Recovery. If you've got questions about addiction and recovery from a Catholic perspective, from a Christian perspective, you are welcome to call 888-318-7884. Anybody is welcome to pick up that phone and call. We're going to head out to Idaho for our next call. Emma is in Hayden, Idaho, watching on YouTube. Welcome back, Emma.
So much. I just wanted to share my aha moment. I'm sober for 14 and a half years.
Praise God.
And I know, yeah, praise God all the way. My sponsor at the time, I was such a martyr. I mean, I just was such a martyr. And I'd goof up and I'd relapse. And she said, well, maybe you're just not done. And I used to get so mad at her. And then she said, what's going on? Why do you keep relapsing? And I said, well, you drink too if this happened to you and this happened to you and this happened to you. She looked me straight in the eye and she said, Emma, get off the cross. We need the wood. And it was that simple phrase. I realized I wasn't going to get any more sympathy, and I needed to pull up my big girl panties and get busy.
Scott?
Love it. Thank you, Emma, for sharing. I think that's a valuable insight that, it's the beauty of working with a sponsor as well, or a trusted individual, or someone who can provide some guidance for us, is that they're going to tell us not what we want to hear, but what we need to hear. And, that's my experience as well in working with sponsors along my recovery journey. There is also a common thread of victimhood amongst those who struggle with addiction. I shared previously, martyrdom, that can lead to this, codependency might have one of the symptoms of such might be martyrdom as well. And so we use that to justify our bad behavior. And it's, like resentment. It's like drinking poison, hoping that another person gets hurt. I was in a similar spot. I was 21 years old in a treatment center, trying to get sober, or maybe even just trying to give the impression that I was getting sober. And I remember jotting down some notes. I was thinking, I'm going to write a book one day, and writing down all the things that had happened to me. And if that book had been published, it probably would have been titled, If You Had My Life, You'd Be an Alcoholic Too, which is such a very similar spirit to what Emma's expressing. But we can't find any kind of solution or healing with that type of attitude. We need to take responsibility for our actions and just do the next right thing. So thank you, Emma, for sharing.
Thank you, Emma.
Bye.
Bye. It's always nice when Emma calls. Our guest is Scott Weeman. You are welcome to call with your questions about addiction and recovery. 888-318-7884. Going up to Nebraska now, listening on Spirit Catholic Radio. Tom in Omaha, Nebraska. Welcome, Tom. Go ahead with your question for Scott.
Thank you very much. Here's my question. When you say addictions, lustful addictions, what does that include, or what do you mean by that?
Yeah, that's I would say a phrase that can be a catch-all for a variety of sexual types of addictions. It might include, and is certainly not limited to, pornography addiction, masturbation addiction, oftentimes come hand in hand. Otherwise, sexual acting out, compulsion to watch erotic videos or read erotic stories. It can be even further to the extreme of seeking prostitution or paying for sex. And when that behavior becomes compulsive, or certainly that behavior is certainly not excusable in any form. But when it can't be stopped on our own, that's when we would label it as addictive or compulsive at the very least. And whether one identifies as being addicted or compulsive or having an unhealthy attachment doesn't matter to me, as long as you're willing to set that behavior aside and seek the help of God.
Tom, thank you very much. Yeah. Did you want to say something?
I was just wondering what Tom's definition of lust addiction might be, but if he's still on.
Yeah, Tom.
Well, what I was getting at, I should have been more specific. When it comes to homosexuals, what do you have to say about that?
Well, I think that there are a lot of behaviors that, I think having a same-sex attraction, I would not consider, essentially all the time an addictive behavior, but there are some behaviors that might surround one's same-sex attraction that they find really challenged by. We have people who reach out to us who are impacted by same-sex attraction and may even be in a heterosexual marriage or relationship and unsure of what to do. And sometimes the compulsive thinking around that can be create a spiritual void and certainly emotional turmoil within an individual and a family.
Tom, thank you. The number here is 888-318-7884. We're talking with Scott Wieman, founder of Catholic in Recovery, about addiction and recovery. If you have questions, 888-318-7884. I'm going to ask a question that I know that lots of people have, and somebody's probably going to call and ask it, so I might as well just get it out of the way. Can I start a Catholic in Recovery group at my parish or in my town, and how do I do that?
Absolutely. Yes. We starting new Catholic in Recovery groups all the time around the United States, into Canada, Mexico. In fact, I've even had a discussion with a team earlier today in Europe who is looking to get some resources made available first in a virtual setting, early morning Europe time, for those who are wanting to get their day started with some a Catholic in Recovery reflection and meeting. So to start a meeting, whether it's in a parish or at a outside of the parish setting or even with diocesan support, you can go to our website, catholicinrecovery.com, and then one of the header options, one of the menu options is support and serve, and then click the link for start a meeting and fill out the form, which just requests a little bit of information about you, and we'll follow up with you to walk through the process of learning more about Catholic in Recovery, seeing if it's a good fit, bringing that to your pastor. Oftentimes, pastors know the pastoral needs of individuals and families impacted by addiction and are often very supportive of getting new groups started. But it's as simple as that. Having some recovery experience yourself is essential. We can't give away what we don't have. And we have all the tools and resources to help get you started, whether physical resources, getting the word out in the community, and having that discussion with your pastor as well.
Rita is in Columbus, Ohio, listening on St. Gabriel Radio. Glad you're here. Rita, go ahead with your question for Scott.
Thank you. I'm familiar with 12-Step, and I'm also familiar with your books. I bought them just to have them on my own. I'm 67 and actually have had a very unhealthy attachment to the idea of weight and food, very unhealthy. I know it's a spiritual battle. My question is this. My parish here in Newark is a large one, and we actually have a group going on. I'm hesitant to go. I know that often, people are supposed to remain anonymous. Also, while I very much believe and have read a lot about the scientific things of food addiction that they're realizing, a lot of people still don't believe it is. And so I'm trying to understand, how all the addictions work together in a group, if that question makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the call, Rita. And we've got, great, as you maybe mentioned, around Columbus, Ohio, a great Catholic in Recovery community with meetings throughout the week. Virtual meetings are available for a local group, and also, you might also get your experience with Catholic in Recovery started by joining a virtual Catholic in Recovery meeting, which happened throughout all day and throughout the week. Addiction, as we understand it, manifests in a variety of different ways. What I mentioned at the start of the show, impacting through alcoholism, drug addiction, food-related addictions, lust, gambling, workaholism, etc. Those I see as just different symptoms of the same spiritual malady. There are certainly unique nuances to each of the addictions and some things that need to be understood, particularly as they relate to food addiction. And one of our resources, CIR Plus, provides a platform of resources and videos, and we'll walk you through your first 90 days of recovery. We even have a course on that platform that specifically speaks to some of the nuanced differences related to those who are seeking recovery from food-related addictions, whereas the help of a dietitian or nutritionist might be helpful. And, there are a variety of other secular 12-step groups related to food-related addictions. I would suggest perhaps getting started in a virtual meeting. Some of those virtual meetings are general recovery meetings, as are most of the meetings that are in person, bringing together people with a variety of addictions. I kind of identify myself as an all of the above type of an addict. It can be really simple to just put away, well, not simple at all, but, oftentimes we see someone, step away from one addiction and replace it with another that is still as spiritually deadly as the first. And that's not really a solution at all, but a holistic solution can be sought by getting the experience of people with a variety of addictions. We do have some virtual meetings specifically related to compulsive eating behaviors, a couple of days per week, and so you might explore that. But the anonymity can be found in virtual meetings, certainly. And there is a great emphasis put on privacy and anonymity, and in our in-person meetings as well. You can be certain that no one's going to be speaking to the public that you were out and that you were a part of the meeting at all.
Rita, thank you. More calls to come with Scott Wieman on addiction and recovery. We hope that one of the things that we communicate here at Catholic Answers Live is that our Catholic faith allows us to be fully serious about all the problems we encounter in the church and in the world, but it also lets us have light hearts and maybe even mix in a bit of fun. And that is exactly what our good friend Joe Heschmeyer does in his popular podcast, Shameless Popery. You should check it out at shamelessjoe.com. Joe's got a deep grasp of the faith, morals, the teachings of the church, all that, but he's also got a witty conversational style. He entertains and he informs, but you will leave equipped to better answer the most common challenges, misconceptions, and questions about the Catholic faith. He's got insightful guests, he does on-air debates, and he takes a close look into all the things that you want to know about as a Catholic living today. You'll walk away knowledgeable and filled with joy. Look for Joe on his YouTube channel. Check him out at shamelessjoe.com or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, become a patron.
Our Lord needs articulate defenders of the truth to spread the joy of the Catholic faith. Catholic Answers monthly giving club, Society 315, helps you fulfill the call in 1 Peter 3:15 to always be prepared to make a defense for the hope that is in you. For as little as $10 a month, you'll help Catholics grow in faith, bring lapsed Catholics home, and lead non-Catholics to the truth. Go to casociety315.com and join today.
From its earliest days, Catholic faith has been lived by a yearly cycle of feasts and seasons. The new book from Mike Aquilina and Adam Lucas, Feasts of Our Fathers, is a one-stop companion for praying and meditating through the holy days and seasons of the Church with help from the most ancient Christian people. Don't just read about the early saints, pray with them. Order your copy of Feasts of Our Fathers now at shop.catholic.com or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore.
Matt Swaim here. Tomorrow on the Sunrise Morning Show, we'll celebrate the Feast of St. James the Greater and get you all the latest news, weather, sports, and a whole lot more. Now back to Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Really wonderful pastoral programs today, two of them. Second hour, Dr. Kevin Majors will be here. He's been growing more popular on the internet. Catholic, graduate of the University of Dallas, a psychiatrist who's doing wonderful work helping people overcome anxiety. There's a faith component to it. There's a medical component to it, and we'd like to ask him about it. And if you'd like to ask him about it, hang on for the second hour and you can do that. This hour, Scott Wieman is here, the founder of Catholic in Recovery. How many Catholic in Recovery groups do you have now around?
We have about 120 active Catholic in Recovery groups around North America.
Man, so and growing. And Catholic in Recovery is just what it sounds like. It's talking in a way that is consistent with the Catholic faith and that draws on the sacraments, on the teaching of Jesus, on the the life of the church to help in the healing process of people working through their recovery and addiction issues. If you've got those, or if you'd like to talk about them, 888-318-7884. I'll tell you what, we'll go to Tim in Dallas, Texas, listening on the Guadalupe Radio Network next. Tim, thank you for waiting. Go ahead with your question.
Hi. Yes, I was wanting to find out about an organization to go to for workaholism.
Yeah, would you tell us, Tim, maybe a little bit more about your experience with workaholism and how that's impacting your life before we dive into the specifics of finding help?
I've been working pretty much like two doubles a day for years, shifts, and it's taken a toll on my body. And I'd like to reverse, if possible, any damage already done. And so that's what I'm seeking to find out about. I've been active in other groups, but this is the first time that it's been workaholism. So yes, that's what I was wanting to pursue.
Yeah, praise God. Thank you. And I ask not to put you on the spot, but just because I imagine that there are others who are listening who can relate to the experience. And I mentioned before that oftentimes we can just we might find freedom from one addiction, but find an attachment to another thing. And work can be one of those escapes that allows us to perhaps avoid the deep roots of our addiction, compulsion, or unhealthy attachment. But oftentimes addiction, whether it's to a substance or a behavior, is an escape from the realities of life. And so certainly, you can find help and healing within Catholic in Recovery. We have in our general recovery groups plenty of people who attend who identify themselves as being someone who's impacted by workaholism or a workaholic, if you will. And a lot of the behaviors are similar. I mentioned the escape method, the means of escaping, and some escape through lust, some escape through pornography, some escape through food, some through alcohol and drugs, others just through work. And as you're noting, that can take a great toll on ourselves, not only physically, but mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And it can be harder than it sounds just to step away from that, because everything in our body and our minds is telling us that this is what we need in order for us to be well. So I would encourage you to check out a Catholic in Recovery group to find healing, a general recovery meeting. In fact, we'll be starting one in the Dallas-Fort Worth area within the next few months. Stay tuned for more information about that. You can get information on our website, CatholicInRecovery.com. But I believe there's also a secular 12-step group that relates to Workaholics Anonymous. You might find some healing there. May not be a place where you can express the fullness of your faith, but you'll certainly meet Jesus and his beloved children, or God's beloved children in those meetings. And I wish you the best and appreciate that you understand the urgency of seeking help.
Tim, thank you. We're talking about addiction and recovery. Scott Weeman is our guest. We go now to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, where Robert is listening on AM 1380. Robert, welcome. Go ahead with your question for Scott.
Hello, thank you. I just want to comment that, first of all, the book is great. Been reading it. We started a core group. The process of getting a Catholics in Recovery group going in our parish. We have a core group that meets once a month, once a week. But my question was, is Scott planning on doing any kind of follow-up book or material that could actually be used at the meetings in the form of a book?
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you for the endorsement. I'm grateful that the book has been helpful in healing in your journey, and also something that you've brought and shared with others. Anything that can unite us to share experience, strength, and hope. To give people the understanding that they're not alone in their challenges with a variety of addictions. As one person in our community says, the healing is in the telling. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about, Catholic in Recovery meetings and groups. And certainly we have resources. Our, Catholic in Recovery meeting is not simply just, pulling out the 12 steps in the sacraments, but we have, reflections. Actually, you can get access to daily reflections that relate to every single day's Mass readings on CatholicInRecovery.com, and reflections from Catholic in Recovery community members as the Mass readings relate to their experience with a variety of addictions. We are in the works and actually just submitted a manuscript for Recovery Rosary, meditations for individuals and families impacted by addictions, compulsions, and unhealthy attachments, which is set to be published by Ave Maria Press in the spring. And we have 20 Catholic in Recovery community members who have contributed their own personal testimonies and meditations on each mystery of the Rosary, a guide, a prayer guide, or perhaps something that can intellectually aid one's experience with praying the Rosary. So look for that in the spring of 2025. But yeah, I think anything that really brings us an opportunity to reflect, be centered on Jesus Christ, the sacramental life of the Church, and give us a space to share experience, strength, and hope is valuable. So I appreciate that, Rob, and looking forward to the development of more Catholic in Recovery resources and fellowship in the Baton Rouge area.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been sober 29 years, part of the area a long time, but this adds a whole new element to my sobriety, and it's pretty awesome for what we're doing so far. So I just wanted to give you a shout out. Great job on the book. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Rob.
Nice
one
call.
person's. I heard from one person earlier today who participates in virtual Catholic in Recovery meetings, and she said that CIR is saving her recovery. And she's been sober in the rooms of various recovery meetings for some time. But, there can be sometimes a tension if we, between our faith or the, not the principles of those 12-step groups, but just the expression of people who are impacted by a secular culture and perhaps their unwillingness to accept or be open to ideas of Catholic expressions of faith. And she mentioned that being in CIR has allowed her to be a Catholic in recovery, whereas sometimes that might be hard. Not an issue of the groups as a whole or the organizations as a whole, but the individuals who attend who might have some anti-Catholic sentiment that they're expressing.
Robert, thank you again for that call. Scott Weeman's our guest. We're talking about addiction and recovery. If you have questions, 888-318-7884. We're going to the town of T, South Dakota. Veronica, listening on Real Presence Radio. Veronica, welcome.
Thank you. I was thrilled to hear Catholics in Recovery. I've never heard of that.
That's why we do these.
And I've always wanted to start something because I think there's a need in like what you were saying, and I don't know about the book either. I'd love to have it. And the rosary thing is just fantastic. I am a very devout Catholic, and I love my faith. And it took me a long time to get that way because of growing up with alcoholism all around me. Married it, same thing. But, and then image of being thin because I'm from Houston, but we moved to Southern California when I was 10, and I had to go to Catholic school in Beverly Hills, if that gives you any kind of a hint. And it was all about how you look, what you drove, and that was really a shock. And then to have the alcoholism in the family, I just grew up around it all my life. But it's not just about alcoholism either. So I'm so interested in that. I think it's fantastic what you're doing. I think everyone would benefit from that. I don't know that, like the anonymity, that would be the part that would bother me.
Why, you want to go tell everybody? You want to go share everybody's name? Or that you want your name kept secret? Is that what you're saying?
No, I've heard gossip. I don't gossip.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I gotcha. Scott, what's your response to Veronica?
Yeah, I totally agree with that sentiment that anyone whether identifying as, having an addiction, compulsion, or unhealthy attachment or not, can benefit through working the 12 steps. It's a great platform or just pathway to surrender and fully trust in our Lord, and to look at some of those root issues, resentments, fears, anxieties, as you'll discuss in the next hour, that rule our lives, and that when not addressed, setting aside the alcohol, the drugs, the food, the lust, the gambling is one thing, but that's just a symptom of this deeper spiritual issue that we all share. For some of us, it's expressed in a more tragic way, but we could all really use a means to surrender and trust in our Lord, and take personal responsibilities. The sacramental life of the church certainly also provides an outlet and a means to do that in a real, tangible way. But yeah, the 12 steps, it could be beneficial for everyone. As it says in some recovery literature, it does take a level of honesty that unless your back's to the wall or your life is on the line, you may not be willing to complete. And so, it's a simple program, but certainly not easy. But rigorous honesty and, love of neighbor and seeking, justice, all beautiful outcomes of working through the 12 steps, in addition to, dealing with fears, anxieties, doubts, depression, things of that nature. And certainly she also touched on, the family impact of addiction, that when we grow up in an alcoholic home or a home that's fueled or riddled by addiction, a variety of types, it creates patterns within us that does not just go away when we become adults, but rather manifests oftentimes even further in some subtle ways that can be hard to identify. And so whether a family member impacted by a loved one's addiction or dealing with your own addiction, I strongly encourage the 12 steps, getting educated, and Catholic in Recovery provides an outlet to do that in a way that's fully integrating our faith in the sacraments.
Veronica, I'm so delighted with your call, because part of why we have Scott on is just his work is wonderful, but this is something more people should know about, and priests should know about it. Certainly pastors and bishops should know about it, so that they know that there's something that they can invite in and offer to their parishioners. But Jesus is a healer, and he loves everybody. He wants us all healed, and so we are delighted to be able to promote this healing ministry. CatholicInRecovery.com is where anyone can go and find out more. CatholicInRecovery.com. I'm not a prophet, but I said this was going to happen. All the calls just pouring in now at the end of the show, so we'll get to as many of them as we can with Scott Wieman, our guest, right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
Hang on, we'll be right back with more Catholic Answers Live.
The Catechism defines evangelization as the proclamation of Christ and His gospel by word and the testimony of life. But what does that look like in real life? It looks like St. Paul street evangelists out in the public square sharing the good news. We're a Catholic nonprofit that starts conversations by handing out free sacramentals. Then we employ our method of listen, befriend, proclaim, and invite. Catholic Answers is supported in part by St. Paul Street Evangelization. Visit streetevangelization.com to learn more.
This is Father Timothy Vaverick. We need to go to confession because we're sinners. Confession is the sacrament of penance. Whenever we sin, we ought immediately acknowledge that sin and ask pardon of the Lord. But we should also form the intention, especially if we've committed mortal sin, to come to the Lord in the sacrament to receive His grace, because we're always in need of growing deeper in His love.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Just delighted whenever Scott Wieman is here, and you're welcome to call if you have questions about addiction and recovery, 888-318-7884. Before I go back to the phones, I do want to ask you for your help. If Catholic Answers Live has been helpful to you or a family member or the students in your class or whatever, and you'd be willing to share a testimonial with us, we would appreciate it. You can do it audio or video at CatholicAnswersLive.com. Just click the red testimonial button. It means a lot to us to be able to share these with others. Just go to CatholicAnswersLive.com, click the red testimonial button, and we'd be grateful for your help. Maria is in New Orleans, Louisiana, listening to EWTN on Channel 130 Sirius XM satellite radio, Maria, welcome. Go ahead with your question for Scott Weeman.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Very well.
Can you hear me?
Yes?
Okay, great. Number one, thank you both for doing this. I mean, it sounds great, Catholics in Recovery. I mean, it's like a no-brainer. Why didn't anybody think of this 50, 75 years ago? We want to, and also this, I'm glad I tuned in. It's divine providence. I wish I would have heard about this as a devout Catholic. My father's from Sicily and raised our children Catholic. 6 years ago, I lost my sons to the disease of addiction. And as a Catholic, I mean, we did our rosaries. We did everything we needed to do. And we know, him and the father both know, that all of our prayers that, our son would have never been separated through mortal sin, that, God always take him home before then. In that single car accident when he died, I realized he's in heaven. But at the end of the day, had that been here, and this would have been the Einstein thing in his brain to remind him of what our Catholic faith really is, what society tries to take away. Imagine he's 19 years old and going through life, and now looking back, I realize it was probably a disordered sexual thing where he was dealing with, and us being Catholic, devout parents, Sicilian grandparents, everything, you're not going to share that with your parents. And I think that's what kind of went him into the direction of alcohol. And then later when he shared it with us and we all expressed, we're going to work through this because, this is not, God's divine plan. But by that time, the alcohol had already become an addiction. Mm-hmm. And it's, wow, what great things you're doing. If I could do anything to help y'all, go to churches. So men need to know this all around. The future of this country for men, addiction and gambling and pornography is going to take them down.
Maria,
and
let
is
me
a beautiful gift for men.
Yes, thank you. I just want to get Scott to respond, but I'll come back to you. Scott?
Well, every time we hear a story of someone whose life has been lost to addiction, it just reminds us of the tragic and deadly nature of this spiritual disease. And I'm really sorry, Maria, to hear of your loss. And, I hope that you and your family are finding ways to cope and find hope in our Lord through, even if it's years ago, certainly that's going to leave a mark on our lives and on us until the day that we pass. And so I'm so sorry to hear that. And I recently lost a friend in San Diego just a few days ago. Got a text message on Monday that this gentleman passed away to alcoholism, someone who I spoke to over the phone just 2 days prior. And, so this is not something to be joking, playing around with. Like, this is our life or death. And, just want to share the expression of love. You can still find support. We have people who participate and help facilitate family and friends Catholic in Recovery meetings who have been in a similar place, who have lost the life of loved ones, children, to alcoholism, drug addiction, and other addictions. And, that we still need to find a way to properly grieve and heal from that loss. And 12-step recovery, Catholic in Recovery, can be a place where you can find some hope and healing around that. In fact, one of the contributors for our Catholic in Recovery Rosary Meditations book speaks of her experience losing her son and the tragedy of that, but also how they've found hope and sustained their own faith life through that. So support for Catholic in Recovery might help save a life of someone else. And I want to encourage anyone who's, feels called to do so to, support our mission in any way that you possibly can.
Maria?
Amen. Thank you. Like I said, if I can do anything in my local parish, drive on my days off, anything just to spread this word, it's so important. And we know our whole family has accepted our son Dominic. It's not, he's gone. He's more alive than most of us walking around. He is more alive than us. And it's just, see you later. Well, this was a spiritual warfare, especially when I realized what caused it was that, he would date the cheerleaders, everybody, the blonde-head, blue-eyed girls, and hear this, tall-looking, brown, handsome, tan guy was having attractions to the opposite sex. We knew it was spiritual, and he didn't get to find that out yet, but I'm sure the Lord revealed that to him in his permissive will, taking him home at the time he did. And although I missed a lot of years and all those things, I think to eternity, when we're all going to be together, including you, what's happened to me, I feel like I've always been Catholic, but my son dying saved my soul, because now I realize I was so cynical. I mean, I didn't even want to hear addiction stories. I was mad. I didn't want to hear someone recovered. And that was Satan again with the same spiritual, warfare, not just on my family. We're protected, through all those rosary beads from Sicilian, prayers on those rosaries.
Oh, you got 1,000 years of rosaries.
A lot of other people. You do, and you know what? It's a grace that never ends. It's $1 trillion, eternal, perpetual account that never ends.
Yeah.
And I proudly now say I was always Catholic, but I was more embarrassed, and I just kept my comments to myself. Now I share it. I had a Muslim man who told me he lost his son a few weeks ago, and I shared my story, and this man walked towards me, hugged me, and sobbed. And as he's hugging me, I'm like, and we were in an Indian, it was a store, a wholesale store, with most of the people there are Muslims, and I was shocked. And I wasn't shocked when I realized it was the Holy Spirit moving in me to this man, so this man could feel comfort and not only hug a woman who's not his wife. But you know, I told him, I said, you will see him again, sir. You will see him again through the grace of, our God. I didn't want to say Jesus or Mary because I just didn't want to, go there. I just wanted to put a little icing on the cake. And I said, don't worry. And I said, he's more alive. Look outside. Look at us. I said, don't you see? That's why the evil entity was after us. I said, we're like animals, animals, but we have reason. We can choose. We can decide, and yet we don't. As long as we have someone who wants to, kill a live animal and a pedophile who wants to have, sex with a child. But to be honest, the father of my son used to tell him, Dominic, it doesn't make the difference to sin, because he used to say, Dad, why
Maria,
are homosexuals
Maria, I'm sorry that I have to interrupt you, but you are on fire. But I have to let Scott talk to as many people as I can. God bless you. Thank you so much for the call and for sharing about your son Dominic. Thank you very much for being willing to do that. Elizabeth's in Texas. Elizabeth, thank you for waiting. Go ahead with your question for Scott Weeman.
Yes. Hello.
Hi,
Can you hear me?
Very well, yeah.
Yes. Hi. I just wanted to say thank you for taking my call, and I want to also thank the 12-step programs. There's a lot of programs. I found Emotions Anonymous. I found Eating Anonymous. There's a lot of 12-step programs. There's not just Alcoholic Anonymous. There's a lot of programs, and Emotions Anonymous is one that I'm in, as well as Al-Anon, which is helping families of alcoholics. So the 12 steps, I also found the Bible verses for each of the 12 steps. There's also the 12 concepts and 12 traditions. So Al-Anon has the Pathway to Recovery workbook, where you go through the 12 steps and you go through the 12 traditions and 12 concepts. You answer questions. And then there's the Plan to Progress, which goes through a lot of emotions like communication, financial resources,
Elizabeth, I feel like you're on fire yourself, but in your case, to share all these resources. But I'm getting nervous that we're getting near the end. Did you want to respond to what Elizabeth said, Scott Weeman?
Yeah, I think she's just making a point that addiction can manifest in a variety of ways, and by the grace of God, so can 12-step recovery can help with a variety of issues as well. There is an anonymous group for nearly every condition that we might share as humans, and whether it's a battle with emotions or the family impact of addiction or workaholism or technology addiction, codependency, alcohol, drugs, food, lust, there's a solution. And I would strongly encourage also perhaps adding the Catholic in Recovery workbook to that, which is not set to change the 12 steps, but to find a way to integrate the beauty and the truth of our Catholic faith into that process, and find how our faith and our recovery can be coexisting. And praise God, and thank you for sharing the beauty that you've experienced, Elizabeth.
Elizabeth, thank you. You can get the Catholic in Recovery workbook at CatholicInRecovery.com. As a matter of fact, you can find out all about Catholic in Recovery. You can, Elizabeth, and anyone can at CatholicInRecovery.com. I've met people who were like, I taught in the public schools for 20 years, and then I taught in a Catholic school, and the thing I love is I get to talk about God there. I get to talk about Jesus and the sacraments. Is that kind of your experience with Catholic in Recovery as far as related to recovery meetings?
Yeah, especially people who have been in, recovery meetings for some time and have, we have to sometimes filter ourselves as we're speaking of God or our higher power or God as we understand him. And so it's not too uncommon for people to attend a Catholic in Recovery meeting for the first time. And as they're about to share, they're just almost like this, sigh of relief, like, man, it's so nice to be able to share about my faith in a meeting like this.
Yeah.
Not too different from the expression that you just mentioned about teachers moving from a secular school to a Catholic school.
Yeah, and one thing I've always admired about you, Scott, is you're not trying to replace whatever recovery program. So you're trying to provide this church-based, or Jesus-based, sacramental-based recovery to bring that to its fulfillment. So thank you for that, Scott.
Really create a bridge between recovery and the church. All are welcome.
Oh, what a beautiful sentiment. And we always love it when Scott Weeman's here. If you'd like to find out more information, please do check out CatholicInRecovery.com. Scott's book is The 12 Steps in the Sacraments. I've always gotten that title right every time I've said it, and I did it again. And Scott Weeman, thanks. I hope we see you again soon.
Thank you. Have a great second hour.
Hey, coming up, Dr. Kevin Majors will be here, and we'll talk about anxiety. Pastoral show today on Catholic Answers Live. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Thank you so much for being here with us and coming back for another hour. We said we're going to talk about anxiety this hour, and we are. It seems to be almost an epidemic of anxiety that we're involved in. And what can we do about this? Is it a spiritual problem, a social problem, a psychiatric problem? If you have questions about anxiety, about facing anxiety, about overcoming anxiety, this hour is for you. The number is 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. Our guest is Dr. Kevin Majors. Dr. Majors is a psychiatrist. He's currently on the faculty of Harvard Medical School, where he teaches a weekly class on cognitive behavioral therapy to psychiatrists in training at the Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center. More important than that, he's a graduate of the University of Dallas. More proof of the fine work that they're doing at the University of Dallas. And he's here to help you and us as we consider this, what I said before was an epidemic of, I don't know if that's a very scientific way of thinking about it, but it does seem to be kind of a flood of anxiety. Your call's welcome. 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. Dr. Kevin Majors, thank you very much for being here with us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's great to be on.
So maybe we could start with just that, the question that I started with. I mean, is it kind of a flood, or is it more anxiety now than there used to be, or is it just that we're attending to it more? Where are we?
I think it's both things. I think that right now, if you look in the last year, probably 1 in 5 Americans have an actual diagnosis of an anxiety disorder. So the most common being, generalized anxiety disorder, which is worrying too much. But panic disorder is very common as well. And then there's a host of others. So it's become very common. Now the lifetime prevalence is almost 1 in 3. Ooh. It's like 1 in 3 Americans at some point and it's only getting more common. And I don't think that it's simply that we're catching more of it, although that's also part of it. It's true that there's less stigma to talk about anxiety. So people are more open about it. But a lot of this comes from epidemiological surveys, which we've been doing for years, decades. And so, in fact, is picking up an actual increase in these things.
Now, this is kind of your expertise. The mode or method that you embrace in dealing with anxiety is cognitive behavioral therapy. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, and I would even take a step back and say, my approach is really safety learning. So safety learning means that if you approach something that is triggering your anxiety while the alarm is sounding, your system will naturally learn that this thing is safe. You won't feel that better necessarily right in that moment. But the next time you do that thing, you'll have less anxiety, and the next time less, and the next time less. That's called habituation. So if you're afraid of public speaking and you go and speak from a large audience, the first time will be harder, but then you do it again, ideally within a week. You do it again, and then it's a little bit less. Do it again, it's a little bit less. And before you know it, you start to really enjoy the process. So safety learning is what underlies what is called cognitive behavioral therapy. So cognitive behavioral therapy is a way of doing safety learning by doing what was called exposure therapy. And this started, goes way back, treating snake phobia, for instance. One of the giants in the field, Albert Bandura, got his start helping people with snake phobia. And so, he's actually not CBT, but it's close. So we learned how to treat phobias really well. And then we learned how to treat panic disorder. And then we learned how to treat worrying and then OCD, where people are obsessing. And gradually over the decades, by 2005, we now had the gold standard for treating every single anxiety disorder was exposure therapy.
So that's how you're treating everything with that, because that's been kind of conclusively found to be the method that will work.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, that's why we have all these different diagnoses. We have the diagnoses only to help with research so that we can put people in the different buckets. But gradually there was a revolution where we started to see that, in fact, what we're talking about here are different kinds of triggers people have. But the alarm that gets triggered, which is what you feel when you're having anxiety, that alarm really is the same for every anxiety disorder. And so gradually we got this idea that really there's only one anxiety disorder, and that's seeing anxiety as a disorder. So, because it's the alarm itself that was seen as something bad.
Okay.
And it's not. And so what we were doing with exposure therapy was just proving that, yes, if you approach something that is triggering your alarm while it's sounding, it will do learning, safety learning. And that is the way of growing in confidence and overcoming anxiety.
Well, now I've heard you talk about this in relation to the cross, and this now so here we're taking a journey from what is medical language to religious language, or the language of our spiritual lives. But what does embracing the cross, which I know is a phrase that you've used, have to do with dealing with anxiety?
It's the fastest way of doing safety learning.
Oh,
so if you see that the cross is actually the discomfort of the alarm itself, and you can welcome and embrace that, the more positively you do that, the more eagerly you do that, the faster the safety learning.
So in a way, this is almost a medical view on the one who embraces his life loses it. If you think of embracing your life as avoiding the things that stress you out, that you'll be more alive if you lose your life and face the things that are stressing you out.
Yeah, and you could say also, it's the cause that makes the martyr. So the more you can actually try to suffer for the love of God, the discomfort that's present, the more positive it will be, the more eagerly you can embrace it. But that's, in a way, jumping to what's in psychology, one of the harder skills to master. And that's the skill of reframing, where you can take something that you were a challenge, that you were viewing as a threat, and now widen the context to see it as an opportunity for some deeper kind of growth, for learning and practice. So faith is actually what gives us the widest context. That's why,
But listening to you say that, for some reason, I don't know why. This is just what happened. Recently, I've spoken to several Catholic people who had quite profoundly disabled children in one way or another, and they said how much they dreaded that when they first got the news, how horrible and heartbreaking it was, and then they, to a person, say, "This has been the source of life in my life. This is where and you know, with, like, for example, abortion, people are avoiding children who have any kind of difficulty, and so when you're talking about that, just saying, you know, the more enthusiastically you embrace the cross, the more it will heal. That put me in the mind of this experience that you hear again and again from the parents of disabled children.
Absolutely. Now, reframing a disability in a child and facing like a life with that is quite the challenge. So, and just as reframing anxiety itself, there are, in fact, we can talk about, there are medical ways of reframing that make it a little bit easier as well. You can understand what your body's doing, which is kind of trusting why we're designed this way. And so there's a genius in our design. Anxiety is not a glitch, it's a feature. So there's something there that we can learn to utilize. But to say that those kind of big reframes, it would be a lot to just tell people the theory and expect them to be able to do that, and I don't do that. Because they would experience it as invalidating or dismissive. So I think that we can get better and better at practicing this art of reframing. If you can just look at something in the next hour that you're dreading, or that you know will be a definite challenge, and then ask yourself, how could this thing in my next ordinary hour of work, how could that be for me an opportunity for a new kind of growth, a new kind of love that I can practice there? What's the ideal? What could love call for in that challenge in this next hour? In psychology, it's better that people build up practice bit by bit. You start by reframing smaller crosses, smaller things. You can get to the point, though, where you think of the challenge in the next hour of work and seeing that that challenge is the cross waiting to be embraced. It's perhaps small, but it's real. And as you try to really stretch yourself in that hour of work to grow in some real way, to bring some ideals into this, thinking what would be the way I could do this that would be the most generous, the most caring, the most loving, the most encouraging for others, or whatever it may be. I think we're able to see that, in fact, that's how ideals become a reality, through this kind of sacrifice that's willingly embraced. So in fact, it's what allows us then to bring ideals concretely into our life so that they improve how we work. I think that work is actually central to learning to practice reframing. And the more people do that, the better they get at reframing the challenge in the hour ahead. The more they will be able to reframe big things as well.
So when you say work, you mean our job, but if we're a parent, then the work of parenting. If we're a radio host, then the work of radio hosting. The things that are, I hate that part of this job. Those are actually an opportunity?
Yes. So that is where we'd be tempted to complain or dread.
Yeah.
That means we have an automatic negative frame.
Right.
All of cognitive therapy comes down to taking that automatic negative frame and deliberately widening it. And that is where the light of faith shines. Faith allows us to see things in a wider context. What is so amazing about the faith is that it applies to the tedium of the next hour of work as equally as it applies to a panic attack or even disability, even suffering and death.
Yeah.
The faith equally allows us to reframe any level of challenge.
The number is 888-318-7884. Our guest is Dr. Kevin Magers. This is the work that he does. If you have questions about anxiety, overcoming anxiety, about the role of both the medical side of things and the faith side of things in addressing anxiety, you are welcome to call 888-318-7884. I will get to calls when we come back from the break. Dr. Magers, before we go to the break, I want to just ask you, there could be kind of a utilitarian way to think of this, that with the faith is worthwhile because it can, give me a different frame. But it doesn't seem that that's what you're saying. It seems rather that the faith is true, and if we look at things through that frame, we will naturally learn better ways of dealing. We'll come to love maybe even the things that we hate.
Yeah, it's true that the faith is useful for everything. So I think that there's a truth in that.
Right.
But it doesn't make us utilitarian. And just as you can say that love is what gives actuality to every other virtue, is what moves and produces every other virtue in us. The light of faith is the one light by which we see every ideal. We see meaning in every challenge. So the faith is capable of shining a light on any challenge, from the smallest, most kind of daily challenge to the greatest challenges in life.
So that's what my grandmother was doing when something would happen as a child, and she would say, you can offer it up, for the good of somebody, for this person or that person. She's saying, well, this thing that you hate naturally in supernatural light is actually an opportunity for you.
Yeah. And so what I think is having faith makes it easier for us to trust that the outcomes will be taken care of by God. And what we have responsibility for is crafting our own actions, what we actually do. So there's a lot to be said about how this how do you actually apply this in life? Because it does require all the virtues. It requires a detachment from outcomes. It requires a trust in the very body that we have been given by God, so that it's working in the right way, learning to trust your body. So there's a lot that goes into it. So I wouldn't want to say that faith is an easy solution to anxiety, but faith does shine light on how these struggles can have more meaning and can give us the confidence to move forward.
We're talking again with Dr. Kevin Magers, psychiatrist and Catholic and graduate of the University of Dallas, and applying the most up-to-date, latest things that we know about healing anxiety, but also relating those to the ancient things, the things that we have been given in the revelation of the person of Jesus Christ. If you have questions about anxiety, come on, I know you do. We get this all the time, and now you got the guy here that can really answer the questions. Go ahead and call 888-318-7884. There are a couple lines open, so you can get in right now, 888-318-7884.
Stay with us for more Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Magnificat. Published monthly, Magnificat features texts of daily Mass, prayers, articles, meditations, art commentaries, and more, in step with the liturgical rhythm of the Church, on the web at magnificat.com.
EWTN Religious Catalog has great summer reading for kids. Blessed Carlo Acutis, The Amazing Discovery of a Teenager in Heaven, is a chapter book that tells about the Church's first millennial on the path to sainthood and the process of canonization that will get him there. It's one of many great summer reading suggestions for kids from EWTN Religious Catalog. For more, visit EWTNRC.com today.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I am Cy Kellett, your host. We have a new guest. I guess we have not welcomed before, but we're delighted to welcome him, Dr. Kevin Magers, coming to us from Massachusetts, from Cambridge, Massachusetts. He teaches in a course in the Harvard Medical School on the very topic that we are talking about, and is able to come at this topic from both the faith and the medical perspective. If you have questions about anxiety, you are welcome to call 888-318-7884. The plague of anxiety all around us. And if you are caught up in that, or there's someone else that you would like some help helping, or knowing what to say to, you're very welcome to call. 888-318-7884. We'll start in Canton, Massachusetts. Okay, it's going to be an all Massachusetts show this hour. Ellen is in Canton watching on YouTube. Ellen, thank you for the call. Go ahead with your question for Dr. Magers.
Hi, Cy. Hi, Dr. Magers. Thank you for taking my call. I'm wondering what the doctor's opinion is on with anxiety and delving into people's childhoods and what may have been lacking, or anything that may have resulted in anxiety, or doctor, do you mostly focus on cognitive behavioral therapy? Do you think it's a waste of time to go into childhood stuff, that type of thing?
Great question. The goal of going into the childhood experiences is to help people be more understanding with their present reactions. So sometimes when we have reactions, we can be internally harsh and judgmental about those reactions. Like, why do I keep thinking this? Or why am I like this? Or why? There can be a lot of criticizing of self. So I think that one of the best uses of talking about the past is just for people to see that it's understandable that this is hard for them. And so it might be that they didn't get the support that they needed, or there's just modeling going on of how do we handle challenge, and most of the model was avoidance. So I think that when we have that tendency to judge, that itself is an expression of being unwilling to let the anxiety simply be there. So if there's an obstacle to willingness, then it could serve a purpose. There might be other reasons, like if you're concerned about not wanting to pass on certain behaviors or patterns, to the next generation. I'm not saying there's no reason you couldn't fruitfully do it, but in the way I practice, it'd mostly be looking at helping people to be more willing to experience the feelings of anxiety when they come. Sometimes too, how the anxiety actually shows up can differ based on childhood experiences. I encourage people to try to experience what they can of the anxiety in the front of their chest. Anxiety is like a tension superimposed right in the front of the chest. And if you can feel how as you inhale, it gets slightly increased, And then as you exhale, it relaxes slightly. That is enough of openness that you will process the signal in a healthy way. So you just want to learn to get better at feeling the signal of anxiety. So if there's something blocking that, of willingness, then yes, we try to be more compassionate with it. But you can also just learn to practice willingness in small doses.
Does that help you, Ellen?
Absolutely, that is a brilliant answer, and it helps me a lot. So you're saying that they can both be used in combination sometimes. That might be helpful.
Absolutely. And there are different schools of thought on like how you try combining them, but I would try to keep it simple. If there is something that allows you, like even a memory, can allow you to access an emotion that could be used as the basis for practice. And then once you feel the emotion, you just practice feeling it as fully as you can. You try to get better at feeling it.
Okay, Ellen?
That's fabulous. Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you so much, Doctor. Thanks a lot, Sai.
Oh, thank
You're
you,
welcome,
Ellen. It's nice to hear your accent. I mean, I'm glad to have your call and the question, but it's awful nice to hear that to English being spoken the way it's supposed to be spoken. So thanks, Ellen. The number here, just one line open right now, 888-318-7884. Erica is in Salem, and I'm not exactly sure. There's Salem in quite a few different places, so I don't know where you're calling from, Erica, but you're welcome here. Erica?
Hello?
Hi, yeah, go ahead with your question
right.
for Dr. Majors.
So as a mom, I have 5 kids, and so just managing stuff of day-to-day life in the home or trying to get kids to do what they're supposed to do and all of that, I get extremely overwhelmed sometimes. Is that overwhelm anxiety?
Not necessarily. Being overwhelmed is usually when we have this sense that everything has to be done at the same time. So I call that the illusion of simultaneity. So you think that and what often is best for that is learning to space out what needs to be done. If you do something, try to get your whole attention into how you do it, so that small task, whatever it is, it's like a reservoir, a vessel holding your attention, and then try to pass it cleanly to the next and cleanly to the next. If you get interrupted, it's perfectly fine. Then just put all your attention into the interruption, and then go back. So there can be a way of working methodically with a kind of inner peace, that you can cultivate, and often that's enough to slightly slow down, so you don't feel like you have to do everything all at once.
What do you think, Erica?
Well, I could certainly see how that might work if you can master it. Mastering it sounds awful.
Yeah.
I think you hit that one on the head.
Yeah. And so I think the other thing is that when you have young children, it probably isn't that you're constantly in threat mode, but you are constantly overworked. So to the extent also that there's moments that you can have for rest, or that there can be any kind of help to give you some time off to decompress. Because I think that's the toughest thing about being a young mother, is that it's just the level of work that you have to do and the level of constant demands being put on you. So if you can at least interiorly try to stay cheerful and patient, that would be at least an enormous gain. And you'll probably feel less overwhelmed.
Erica, thank you so much for the call. I want to send you a book. I know it might be 18 years before you get a chance to read it, so I'm not trying to give you something else to do, but it's called Secrets from Heaven, The Parables and Sayings of Jesus Christ, an absolutely beautiful book from our friend, Father Sebastian Walsh. If you'd like it, all you got to do is give us an address real quick. We'll send it off. We'll get it to you. Just hang on, Erica. Thank you very much. Our guest is Dr. Kevin Majors. Our phone lines are full, so we will have lots of questions when we come back. One thing I have not mentioned is Dr. Majors is the founder of Optimal Work, where it's a digital coaching platform that helps you work on how to flourish in a work situation. You already told us about how our response to work is a great deal of the journey, I suppose, of the job of letting go of anxiety. So we'll talk about that a little bit when we come back. We have to do a very quick break. There's no choice because the music's going to start playing and I have to go. And while I'm sending you off to that break, I'll invite you again to come to our conference. I just mentioned that book. Well, we decided that book was so good, we have a conference on the same theme, the parables, sermons, and conversations of Jesus Christ. And the priest who wrote that book I just gave away, Father Sebastian Walsh, will be one of the speakers, as will Dr. Scott Hahn, Kimberly Hahn, Jimmy Aiken, Tim Staples, lots of others. Find out all about it at CatholicAnswersConference.com. It's coming up in September. Many people have forgotten just how revolutionary the Bible creation stories are. But the first 3 chapters of Genesis are a powerful challenge to anyone in any generation who would undervalue human lives. In the Beginning, the new book by Monica Migliorino Miller, will take you on a fantastic journey through the first chapters of Genesis, unfolding the richness of life as God sees it. Get In the Beginning today at shop.catholic.com or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore.
When it comes to Catholic teachings about Mary, there's one question we hear more than any other. Where is that in the Bible? The answer? Everywhere. In Bible Mary, the Mother of Jesus and the Word of God, Father John Weiss opens Scripture to reveal a Mary who has been hiding in plain sight. Order your copy of Bible Mary today at shop.catholic.com or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
This year, the Catholic Answers Conference turns to the parables, sermons, and conversations of Jesus Christ. Join special guests Scott and Kimberly Hahn, Dr. Ray Guarendi, and an all-star lineup of speakers September 26th through 29th. Spend time with your favorite Catholic Answers apologists and our special guests right here in beautiful San Diego. Seats are still available, but going fast. Use promo code EARLY to save $50 and register today at CatholicAnswersConference.com.
If you're not a Bible scholar, the full message of how the Sunday Mass readings fit together can be tough to comprehend. Apologist Carlo Broussard is here to help. Join Carlo every Friday for the Sunday Catholic Word podcast. In each episode, he unpacks the scripture readings for that Sunday and brings them all together so you can better understand and defend the faith. Visit SundayCatholicWord.com to subscribe. That's SundayCatholicWord.com.
Matt Swaim here. Tomorrow on the Sunrise Morning Show, we'll celebrate the Feast of St. James the Greater and get you all the latest news, weather, sports, and a whole lot more. Now back to Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. This is where I don't really want to go back to doing the radio show because at the breaks, I'm getting free therapy from Dr. Majors, but what the heck? I guess we got to go back to doing the show. But I'll just have to keep my problems. I do want you to talk a little bit about Optimal Work, if you could. You're the founder of Optimal Work. What's that about?
Yeah, so Optimal Work grew out of my practice, helping people to work at their best. There is a natural connection between mastering anxiety and mastering your attention. And the same things that you do in exposure therapy, if you do them before an hour of work, you can go right into flow when you sit down to work. So with Sharif Yunus, my co-founder, I started this online platform to teach people these skills of reframing, becoming more mindful and recollected, and then setting challenges for yourself, to practice those in the setting of their next hour of work so that they can experience flow. I think that Optimal Work is now like an exciting way of teaching all the skills of cognitive behavioral therapy, but not taking people out of their ordinary life, even just to go to a therapist appointment. Your work itself can be the training that gives you these skills. And we just released a masterclass called Overcoming Anxiety, which is a deep dive into everything about anxiety to take people through the whole journey.
How wonderful. And so now how can people participate in this? Well,
Yeah, they go to optimwork.com, and you need to set up an account, but there's a 7-day free trial, and you can do the Overcoming Anxiety course in those 7 days if you really wanted to. So we can also have tools like tools on how to do how to do a golden hour, how to set up projects, and so we teach people how to work. There's a tool called the Reframer, which is helping people reframe any challenge that they face. And so there's a lot of things there that put things in the right context.
Yeah.
And essentially, there are, in fact, 2 different high adrenaline states that we can have. One of them is called anxiety, and its peak is panic. But the alternate is flow. So flow is the other high adrenaline state.
Oh.
And the key skill that people really need is welcoming adrenaline itself. So that when you welcome the adrenaline itself, that's actually the essence of anxiety. It's simply adrenaline. Anxiety is adrenaline in a negative frame. Anxiety is like a car with its engine revving while in neutral. Adrenaline is the gas. So yes, you're burning through it by revving it when you're in neutral, but the best thing is to put the car in drive. That's why work is so essential. If you can have some positive vision for how you most want to use the adrenaline to do your best in this task, and then come up with some practical steps, you can actually convert the anxiety into flow.
Wow, is that why? Now I am going to talk about something personal, but I mean, we do a lot of public speaking around here. Like we have a lot of public speakers, and we talk about the experience of public speaking. And often, you're better it actually works better if you were nervous just before you went up there. If
Absolutely.
if you're feeling like, oh, I just don't know about this one, you'll do a way better job.
Yes.
I've never quite understood why that was.
Yeah. So adrenaline can go 2 different pathways in our body. One is peripherally, where it goes to our heart and muscles, and that's what people experience as anxiety if they're not using it to run. Anxiety is also the fight or flight response. So if adrenaline is if you have a negative view of a challenge, you're dreading it, you're anxious, then your muscles are all primed by that peripheral adrenaline to be fighting or fleeing. But the moment there's like a switch you can flip in your mind, and this is what reframing does. Reframing will actually flip the switch where now that challenge we're viewing as a threat, you can flip it and view it as an opportunity for some kind of learning, growth, practice. So once you have that positive vision, it flips your ventral medial prefrontal cortex, which sits at the very top of your entire nervous system, and allows the adrenaline to shift, where now its effect is going to be primarily in your brain, and it's going to boost your IQ. So whatever cognitive skill we can, or ability or capacity we can measure, adrenaline increases it.
Oh.
It makes you better at doing every kind of work. Adrenaline is the perfect performance enhancer. This is why I say we have to trust our bodies. Our bodies were designed by a genius we'll never comprehend. And so when we face a challenge, we get adrenaline available. But if we can have a positive view of the challenge and how we want to stretch ourselves in it, then, in fact, the adrenaline boosts our cognitive abilities. And that's what puts you into flow. But if you don't have that positive view, if you're trying to avoid the challenge, then adrenaline will boost your fight or flight, and particularly your flight. So then now you're going to feel it in the body.
Yeah, I don't have a fight. I just have a flight. I didn't get the fight part. I'm really heavy on flight.
Anger is more the fight part, and anxiety is more the flight part.
All right, back to the phones we go. Our guest is Dr. Kevin Magers, and it's wonderful to be able to talk about these things in a holistic or comprehensive way, where faith is not dismissed and science and medicine is not dismissed. I'll give out the number. We'll try to get you on if you call now, 888-318-7884. Quinn's in Washington, D.C., listening on the Guadalupe Radio Network. Welcome, Quinn. Please go ahead with your question for Dr. Magers.
Hi, thank you, Dr. Magers. As a middle school teacher, I have a group of students every year who experience quite a bit of anxiety. I wanted to know if you have any tips for me as a teacher of preteens. I realize you might not have any tips because it needs to be more specific in terms of what they have anxiety of. But we have a lot of students who just are anxious about school.
Yeah.
Any tips for us?
Yeah, so it's hard to give the most like exact advice from a teacher's perspective. I'll tell you though that the literature on self-efficacy is completely relevant here. So self-efficacy is a kind of confidence we have about the task at hand. And so when it comes to anxiety about particular subjects, teachers actually can be the best models for how to be engaging challenges. Teachers can show that you can work through difficulties in solving whatever the problems are in that discipline. So that even the confidence the teacher has in presenting the material will in some way impact the confidence of the students, the self-efficacy the students have for doing that material. So I think the best gift teachers can give, in fact, is high expectations that we believe people can grow, that just because something is daunting right now doesn't mean it's going to stay daunting. If we can stay engaged, we will get to a solution. So I don't know what you teach, but I can say in general, teachers are always modeling an approach to challenge. And so the more you have that sense of an adventurous spirit and that they can do it and that they have to persevere and that high expectations are a gift to them, not a burden. I think that's the best I think that a teacher can do. There's more that parents can do and stuff when they're with kids. But I think that's at least for teachers, there's really clear data on that.
Quinn, thank you. On I go because we have almost full lines here. Mary is in Ohio. Mary, I'm very glad you called. Go ahead, please, with your question for Dr. Magers.
Thank you both. I suffer with high anxiety, which is what shows itself most right now, depression and obsessive compulsiveness. Right now, because of circumstances in my life, I have a whole lineup of ulcers, and I pick at my skin so bad that I have scars from the excessive picking that I do. And I'm looking for a way to mitigate those activities.
Mm-hmm. Well, Mary, I'm sorry that it's been so hard. I'm limited in the kind of advice that I can give. The thing that you're experiencing sounds like you've been in threat mode for a while. And so it sounds like your system has been giving you very high cortisol levels for a while. So I can speak generally to what helps people with high cortisol. In the first place, I think that attention needs to be paid to diet. So, and to trying to see about, insofar as it's possible for you, to make sure you're having that you're not making any matters worse. Now we talk about these anti-inflammatory diets. So you can look that up. There's also something called broad spectrum micronutrients, which can help a great deal, I think, with some of the things you're mentioning. So I can't go into great detail in here, but there are, you can look up those terms. We're starting to learn now that many of these things, when people have very severe prolonged anxiety, and it's also infecting the GI tract, there can be a vicious cycle there, where as the GI tract's health worsens, they're not getting the nutrients from the foods that they need. So I would say, making sure you're protecting diet and that you're getting the things like magnesium and B12, but look up something called broad spectrum micronutrient. Another thing that is the two other general things that can get people who are stuck in threat mode out is some kind of movement. It could be walking. It would need to be a lot of walking, or it could be jogging or a bike or doing some physical movement. Then gradually, I don't know anything about your physical status to be able to do this. So you'd have to talk to your doctor before you do any new exercise plan. But physical exercise can work wonders in telling our body that now when we're done exercising, it's now we're safe. And it can turn off this kind of threat response that's been stuck on. So those would be, I would say, diet and exercise are actually two fundamental places to start.
Mary, that brings us to the break. I hope that was helpful to you. Thank you so much for the call. Wow, every line full, and we've got one more segment with Dr. Majors, Dr. Kevin Majors, who teaches at the Harvard Medical School psychiatry. But also has developed the podcast and website Optimal Work. You can find it at optimalwork.com, and is helping all kinds of folks overcome this plague of anxiety that we've got, and not averse to sharing how faith is an important part of that growing to overcome and to even embrace all these energies that are often manifest as anxiety. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back with more questions for Dr. Majors right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
You're listening to Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
He was a doctor of the church, a Carmelite, and one of the most famous mystics of all time.
Matthew Bunson and the Doctors of the Church.
St. John of the Cross wanted to help all Christians to become saints. One of his most important teachings was to encourage us all to learn how to love. Where there is no love, he said, put love, and you will find love. He died in 1591.
To find out more about the Doctors of the Church, visit EWTN.com and click on Catholicism.
Who was the first Catholic in your family? Were they evangelized by a friend, a coworker, a stranger? Did you ever think that you could be that person that God uses to save a soul? And that soul could save their family, their grandchildren, and generations to come. At St. Paul Street Evangelization, a Catholic nonprofit, we train, equip, and mobilize Catholic disciples to do the urgent work of evangelization. Catholic Answers is supported in part by St. Paul Street Evangelization, streetevangelization.com.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. What a great Wednesday afternoon we've gotten to have here. Scott Weeman talking about addiction and recovery, first hour. A new guest, Dr. Kevin Majors, here with us this hour to talk about anxiety from the perspective both of medicine and faith. And we've got lots of folks on the line, so I will move forward. But I do want to, you mentioned to me during the break that that there is a connection between that you mentioned to our previous caller about the connection between nutrition and anxiety. You said there's a book that you might recommend to people. Would you do that?
Yeah, there's a great book by Bonnie Kaplan called The Better Brain.
Okay.
So if people want to see the research, because there are, yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, check it out, The Better Brain.
Bonnie Kaplan.
All right, very good. We'll go to Nebraska now. Kyle is in Nebraska listening on 102.7 FM. Welcome, Kyle. Go ahead with your question.
Hello, sorry. Sorry if I sound weird. I'm a bit sick right now, but so how do you deal with the anxieties of knowing that, like, you're always gonna sin, and like it's so available to sin, like, in every way, and it's just your natural order, like, to return to it?
Okay, Kyle. Dr. Majors?
So I couldn't hear so well, but it sounded like he was saying that if you know you could sin.
No, he's saying he's the anxiety that comes from knowing that you'll always return to sin, like that you can't ever overcome it.
Oh, I don't believe that. Yeah, I believe that people can, in fact, can overcome things, and so in fact, that's what the gift of fear is for. There's a way in which fear itself is a gift of the Holy Spirit. And with the gift of fear, it's the one fear of being separated from our loving God that casts out every other fear, so that we become more and more afraid of only one thing, which is separation from God, which is why it's the same as charity, and it goes with charity. So I think that there is a sense that, so I would be concerned, something that we talked about on the breaks is scrupulosity, which is a real affliction where people have, in some sense, like a pathological fear of sin, and particularly a fear of guilt. And scrupulosity can be an expression, at least in some cases, of obsessive compulsive disorder. And so I think that a lot of things that we talk about, it applies perfectly in scrupulosity. I'd have to know more. I'm not sure if I'm answering the question, but I don't.
And it's a little bit hard to hear, Kyle. But Kyle, I'll come back to you. Did you want to have a follow-up question?
Yeah. So with when you fear sin, and you don't want to sin, well, for me personally, why do I always feel like I'm going to return to it? I mean, because I've tried, I've tried to get over the fear and leave it up to God and trust Him in His plan, but I always find myself challenging myself and basically staying in sin. Really.
Okay, Kyle. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that in the end, perfect love is what casts out fear, and that our relationship with God needs to be about the bond with Him. And maybe another way of looking at this is sometimes what happens with morality is it turns into a more left-brain set of rules that we apply. And then sin itself can feel like, ooh, then now it's like a technical, foul or something that we broke a rule. And those are the things that people sometimes feel like they keep breaking these rules. But I think that the real bond with God is a friendship with Him. So love of God, charity, is actually love plus a life lived together. It's love and friendship. And so that can't, I think that has to be more and more like the positive goal that we're stretching ourselves toward. What's the essence of addiction is addictions really can be thought of in this sense as a phobia of cravings. And it's not people that who have addictions are technically afraid of sin or giving in. Really, they're afraid of the unsatisfied craving lasting. And that is what is most aversive to them. So if addictions are a phobia of cravings, then the craving is the cure. Not that you seek it out, because I'd give a mixed signal, but if it happens that there is a craving, that too can then be welcomed fully. And so I actually have some videos. If you go to YouTube, I have a Purity is Possible channel on YouTube that has particularly looking at the question of purity and growing in purity, and going through understanding cravings, understanding how willingness breaks the cycle of addiction, and then going even deeper into some of the things that drive, like shame, that drives it. Those are rich topics, but if you go to my Purity is Possible page on YouTube, you'll see some videos there.
Kyle, thank you very much. On we go. Still have full lines. Jose is in Washington. Jose, thank you for waiting patiently. Go ahead with your question for Dr. Majors.
Yes, good afternoon, both of you. Can you hear me?
Not very well, Jose. Can you talk right into the phone?
Yeah, give me a second.
Are you still there with us, Jose?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Oh, it's getting better. You're getting closer. Are you in the same room with the phone now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm just driving.
Oh, okay.
Are you on speaker?
All right. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I used to be an alcoholic, and I stopped 4.5 years ago. And I had anxieties before that. So while I was drinking, I used to drink to not feel anxiety, because I would feel like panic attacks constantly, like couldn't breathe, et cetera, the shakiness. And now that I'm sober, I still get them. Like I can't, especially after I eat sometimes. And it could be anything. It could be fruit to greasy foods. And while I'm driving, I just get them randomly, and they're so scary. It feels like, my heart, I'm gonna faint, I'm gonna die at the moment. So, I don't know. I've been going to the doctors as well, and I ended up in the hospital a couple times, and they checked my blood work, my EKGs, they done tests, and everything comes out normal and fine, that I'm healthy, but yet I don't feel good.
Okay.
Yeah. Good. Thank you, Jose, for the question. There is a connection between the onset of panic and excessive alcohol use. And this gets into this very funny thing about what alcohol does inside of us. Alcohol enhances the activity of something called a GABA receptor. But when it gets broken down, its breakdown product called acetaldehyde does exactly the opposite thing on the same receptor. So it's a kind of anti-GABA effect. So that's why alcohol initially makes anxiety better, because when you facilitate GABA, you end up feeling calmer. But then once you break down the alcohol into acetaldehyde, then you feel worse, and you are much more likely to panic. So that's a very common setting for developing panic disorder. Panic disorder, if you treat it well, and this is what CBT does, can be treated in as few as one session. So, and the goal, what you try to do, and I'm not doing it here, but what you try to do with the person is bring on the panic attack, and bring it on until finally they can't bring it on at all. And sometimes that's enough to break it. So panic is a glitch in your alarm system where now your threat detector, the amygdala, has identified an element of its own alarm as a threat. So it starts triggering itself. It's like it sees, so if it's like, say, the heart rate increasing, then anything that makes your heart rate increase, then your amygdala says, uh-oh, and it gives you a big bunch of adrenaline, and that makes your heart rate go higher. And your amygdala sees it going higher. It says, uh-oh, and gives you more adrenaline, your heart rate goes higher. So you have what's called a positive feedback loop. And that's what causes a panic attack. So in my Overcoming Anxiety Masterclass in Optimal Work, I go into, I think, a lot of detail about panic and how we help people through it. But I see panic as something is very workable. But it means essentially anytime you can welcome the alarm and the symptoms that you dread the most, see, the welcoming them is the key so that you can start to do safety learning for those very things.
Maybe could he check out the podcast to get started on learning about this?
Yeah, exactly. I have a podcast called the Optimal Work Podcast, and on YouTube there's an Optimal Work channel as well, and there you'll see playlists. Now I think 99% of our listeners do it through Spotify and iTunes, but you can actually find playlists on YouTube, and those can help as well.
Jose, thank you. On we go, because we still have a full phone bank. Elena is in Cincinnati, Ohio, listening on 740 AM. Elena, go ahead with your question.
Hello. So I'm calling because I struggle with anxiety a lot. And a lot of the times I don't realize that I'm getting anxious about things until it piles up to the point where I just throw myself into a pit of anxiety and despair. So my question is, how do you deal with anxiety when you don't realize that you're anxious?
Yeah, my answer would be hour by hour. So if you can be looking really squarely at the challenges you're facing and try to not put them off at all. One of the ways that we create stress is by putting off dealing with challenges. So sometimes when we don't recognize, I don't know if this is happening with you, Elena, but if we're not dealing like head on with things, then they increase in our mind. And the more we don't squarely deal with them or we avoid them, the more they increase. Sometimes it's hard for us to identify, in fact, when we're feeling anxiety. Probably that's because anxiety can look like any other symptom. But what's common to it is there's an urge to avoid the challenge, and you'll always see signs of avoidance somewhere. If you can step by step overcome the avoidance of challenge, you will step by step overcome the anxiety.
Elena, thank you so much for the call. That will have to do it for the calls. We don't have time to take more calls. Our guest has been Dr. Kevin Magers. And could you just run through again where people can find your work? I know that there are many people who would like someone to tell them the real medical truth, but not neglect the faith in healing from anxiety.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I have optimalwork.com is where I have the masterclass on anxiety. It's like 28 lessons going through everything about safety learning and threat learning and willingness and reframing and so on. So I think that would be the first place to look. And then the podcast as well, the Optimal Work podcast.
All right, check it out, optimalwork.com. Thank you very much, those who called. I'm sorry we weren't able to get to everybody, but I imagine we could have done 3 or 4 more hours and we still wouldn't have gotten to everybody. It's wonderful. Thank you, first of all, for accepting our invitation to come on, Dr. Magers. It was wonderful to get to talk with you.
It was great to be with you. Yeah, great. Thanks for having me.
And that'll do it for us. Tomorrow, what are we doing tomorrow? 2 hours of Ask Me Anything? I'm going to guess Jimmy Akin? Is it Jimmy Akin? Did I guess correctly? Oh, man, I am good at this. All right, we'll see you then, God willing, right here on Catholic Answers Live.